So your little warning should come up to ask for you to give consent. So just press got it and we proceed. We would recommend that you keep your cameras turned off unless you're actively participating or asking a question. So this session number 2 is the roundtable discussion on the importance of leadership engagement with disability inclusion. So next slide there, please, Hazel. Oh, we've lost Hazel. Where's the slideshow? There we are. So just to let you know again about real-time captioning in English, will be there on a link on the chat box. And we have our excellent international sign language interpreters as well, who will always be on screen. Useful links, relevant links will be posted in the chat box as well. If you have any technical difficulties, please contact Hazel directly. So there's a drop-down menu in the chat box. You can select Hazel and ask her a direct question. For any content questions, any questions about the actual content that's being presented, please put those questions in the chat box and they'll be gathered up and used at the end of the session for question and answer sessions. So don't hesitate to ask questions. Please try and keep yourselves muted. That's most important. Keep yourselves muted and ideally with the video turned off unless you're actively participating. So we recommend using the gallery function and you'll be able to see all the different speakers. So an accessible recording of the conference will be available after the event, and we'd like to remind you to tweet if you have a Twitter account. That would be great. So here we are on session number 2. This is going to be led by our own Shane Halpin, who's CEO of Via Taurus Christi. And we'll have panelists from CBN Global, Tier from Fund Ireland and Abilis Foundation. So Shane's going to be hosting the session. So I'm going to hand over to him directly to introduce himself and everybody else. Thanks, Shane.
My name is Shane Halpin. I'm the CEO of VC in Dublin. We are an international development and humanitarian organisation. So while we work with marginalised and with people with disability, there's a nagging feeling that we should be doing more to engage with people with disability. And this has crystallised as a result of our engagement with the EU VividT project. In a nutshell, VividT's main aim is to move towards greater disability inclusion in the international development sector and volunteering. It's opened my eyes to the fact that 15% of the world's population has a disability, either acquired or from birth. 15% is a huge number. What organisation can effectively ignore 15% of its target market? But this is what we've been doing in our sector.
Rachel Ryan, Projects Officer with VC.
So, how do we become more inclusive in volunteering and humanitarian aid work? Well, according to our research, a collaborative approach with more engagement and outreach is needed. We in the development sector need to talk to organisations of and for people with disabilities and their networks. Together, we need to engage with donors generally, and with EU volunteering programmes in particular, such as the European Solidarity Corps, to get them to commit to providing funding for reasonable accommodations and supports for people with disabilities.
We need others in the sector to start the journey that we have been on, to learn what needs to be done. We need to combine our resources and we need to engage with the 15%. So what can you do? There are some practical steps you can take. You could review your policies and systems and services to make sure that they are fit for purpose. You could involve a person with disability, for they're the experts. Be an advocate for change with your funder. We need to make reasonable accommodation mandatory in your funding programs. Join a disability forum in your own country. Will you join us?
For more information or to get involved, visit www.vcvolunteers.ie/disability.
Hi, and a very good morning and afternoon to everyone. You are most welcome to our leadership event, which is being organised by VC on behalf of the VividT Consortium. As the promo video explained, my name is Shane Halpin, and I am the CEO of Viatoris Christi, an international volunteering/development organisation based in Dublin, Ireland. Today, we hope to explore how we can awaken a leadership response to the challenge of disability inclusion in our work and programmes.
I'm just trying to kind of get.
We will have a panel discussion along with input from a range of experts.
€20. And you see some.
Sorry, Shane, can I interrupt there? Sorry, could I ask everybody to mute themselves, please? There's somebody whose mic is still left on. If you could just mute that, please, because we can't hear Shane. Thank you.
Thanks, Colette. Sorry. So today we hope to explore how we can awaken a leadership response to the challenge of disability inclusion in our work and on our programs. We will have a panel discussion along with input from a range of experts. So if you have any questions, please feel free to use the chat box. I'm very pleased to be joined today by Katherine Norton. She's the director of EDF, the European Disability Forum, partner in the consortium, who will introduce the VIVIT project and its overall goal and objective. Katherine is the director, as I said, of the EDF, a unique platform which brings together representative organizations of persons with disabilities from across Europe. She is also the vice president of the Social Platform. Social Platform is the largest network of European rights and value-based civil society organizations working in the social sector. Katherine has an academic background in public health and 25 years of experience in the field of disability, with a particular focus on inclusive development, the rights of persons with disabilities in low and middle income countries. So Katherine, over to you.
Thank you very much, Shane. And it's very nice to be with you all here today. So basically, the purpose of the project, right at the beginning, we were informed, and the project leaders reached out to us to be involved in this project to look at inclusion in humanitarian volunteering. And of course, this was something very new for the European Disability Forum. So one of the, for me, one of the most important developments during this period of time, what the project achieved was that we have this partnership between mainstream humanitarian and volunteering organizations and organizations of people with disabilities. So I think the partnership in itself was a really rich process. The development of the project identified right from the beginning, for us, this is something very unique for the European Disability Forum. Our own learning needs were taken into consideration. So the capacity building of the project was based on what the different partners said they needed to learn. And so that meant that any training which took place during the project was really relevant for all of us. There was also, the original project was aimed to have a lot of exchange and learning together. But in fact, with COVID-19, a lot of that had to be redirected to go online. And I think that the project managed to do that really effectively and adapt quite a bit as we went along. So one reflection for the European Disability Forum, our role within this humanitarian inclusion volunteering project was the disability inclusion component. And we realized that we needed to give more support to the other organizations on inclusion and accessibility. So we were able to redirect activities over time and hire an accessibility trainer, which was a learning that we would take into future projects. Actually, we would make sure that we provided for that capacity right up front. This was a learning for us. So I think what the kind of things that were achieved during the project was we all built our own capacity on a range of issues that were tailored to us, such as security, accessibility. We improved our policies in those areas. We received training in those areas. The European Disability Forum our eyes have been opened more to working in the field of volunteering, and we will continue that. And also to the area of independent living and deinstitutionalization and development cooperation. That has opened up for us during the project, and we will continue that. In terms of the way that we were supposed to work. The model of the project was to have a steering committee and so forth. Everything went online, and I have to say that the management, the project management and all the partnership went very, very well and was very efficiently organized. So this we really appreciated. And in that sense, I think that from our point of view, even though the project activities had to change, for us, what we expected to get from the project and what we hoped to get from the project was really exceeded. And so we really look forward to continuing to work in this field with partners. Shane mentioned that EDF is an umbrella organization. And so that means in all of your countries, we also have members. And Shane mentioned in his video as well, that you can join together with networks at country level. And I think this is the best way that we work together in this activity. One last reflection is that we see as during some of the trainings that we had exposure to, that we can see volunteering as a way of career development for people with disabilities, whereas before we thought of it more as social contribution and social participation. But we worked out from working with these volunteer organizations what an important knock-on effect these kind of opportunities can have. And so thank you very much, Shane, for the great cooperation over this period of time. And I'm looking forward to listening to other people's reflections on the project today as well.
Great. Thanks very much, Katherine, for those insights and for the experience that you've had on the air. And again, I'll take this opportunity to thank EDF for all of the resources and all of the experience that they have given to us as an organisation who is really just setting out on this journey. The EDF have been really helpful to us. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our guest speaker today, Barendra Pokharel, who is the Abilis Country Coordinator in Nepal. And he's going to give us some context to our topic this morning on awakening a leadership response. Barendra is a rights activist with a visual impairment living in Nepal, and he was engaged in the establishment of the Asia-Pacific framework of Make the Rights Real. He participated in the Creating New Futures for All research symposium in Sydney University. He has been engaged as a local expert of Abilis Foundation in Finland since 2011 and facilitates the Abilis grant-making mechanism. His role has been recognized for pushing the ratification of CRPD, that's the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability. So Barendra, if I could just hand it over to you for your words of wisdom this morning.
Thank you, Sam. This is indeed my great privilege and honor to present my experiences and the views how persons with disabilities and their representation is very much important in a different aspect of the development. As you mentioned that the role of people with disability and their representing organization is very much important for the policy change. One example I learned from the European Disability Forum, the Practice of Disability Forum. In one literature, I learned that it was a Interparliamentary Disability Caucus that was formed. And when the ratification of CRPD was delayed in Nepal, then I just remember that initiatives and pushed the parliamentarian to establish the Interparliamentary Disability. And finally, it was 2009 when the Interparliamentary Disability Caucus unanimously supported for the ratification of the CRPD. So that was a great initiative, how the leadership of people with disability can play a vital role for the policy change. That time, of course, I was leading the Nepali disability movement as the president of the National Federation of the Disabled Nepal. It is the umbrella organization. And we are also the member of the DPI, the Disabled People's International. I learned from DPI that we have to raise our voice, nothing about us without us. And we have to raise our voice in the policy-making level, a voice of our own. These are two very, very important motto for the organizations of people with disability and the leaders. At the same time, when it was the time when Nepal was making the constitution, and in this instant also, we pushed the parliamentarians. That time I was working as a country coordinator of Abilities Foundation. I'm continuing the same position, and we have granted the grassroots organizations. When the parliamentarians went to the district level, to the grassroots level, to collect the opinion of the people. And that time I led the movement and suggested with the memorandum and submitted to the parliamentarians. When all the parliaments came back to the parliament, then everyone was surprised. Oh, we have so many letters from the people with disability. So we have to put some of the important aspects. Finally, in our constitution now, there are 11 points that has covered the rights of people with disability in the constitution. The most important aspect is the representation of persons with disability in the parliament from the representation modality. So this is what the leaders can do, bring change. And here the leaders should play a vital role if they can build up their capacity, the learning and the continuous updating from the international scenario, the human rights instrument. It is very, very important. So the knowledge, expertise, and the knowledge enhancement is a very, very important aspect. So in the international arena, what is going on, how the human rights instrument are being implemented, and in the United Nations level also, the Universal Periodic Review is from the country level, what is being there in the UPR, Universal Periodic Review. At the same time, CRPD committee is also reviewing the state report. And in the state report, always there are so many the ceremonial things written, but at the same time, the organization of people with disability have vital role to look from the sideline if the reports is giving a real picture. In this instance, Abilities Foundation also facilitated to bring the civil society report, and that was submitted in CRPD committee. Yes.
You've got less than a minute there. Just last comments, thanks.
Yes, yes. So the people with disability and their representative organization has very, very vital role, and for bringing change and enhancing their capabilities, Abilities Foundation is doing from the grassroots level in the global south. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks, Brenda. That's really, really interesting, and you know, it's fascinating that the contribution to Parliament has had that. I'll start my video. Sorry, I have an issue. Sorry, that so that the contribution to Parliament and the representation in Parliament and having that effect, that you know, that it brings it to people's attention, people with disability coming to the fore. It's so important, and I just again, nothing about us without us. Really, really important. I'm not going to speak too long because I'm conscious of the time, but I'm going to now pass it over. I'm going to now introduce our panel this morning, who are going to discuss that input, and also one or two questions around, specifically around awakening response for us as leaders, and how we can empower ourselves and learn about this whole area, because it's, for many of us, it is a new area and not necessarily our core business. So I'm going to introduce now our panel. We have three on our panel this morning. We have David Bainbridge. He's the Executive Director of Cbn Global, based in the UK. We have Sean Copeland, Tier Fund Ireland, and we have Mario Heinemann from Abilities Foundation in Finland. David from Cbn Global has worked for over 30 years in the international relief and development sector, serving in a variety of senior roles at secretariat and project level. He joined CBN in 2016 as the International Director of CBN International Federation, transitioning in 2020 as the Executive Director for CBM Global Disability Inclusion, which is a new federation working in over 20 countries across Africa, Asia, and Latin America. There's a lot more, but probably that will suffice. Sean Copeland, Tear Fund Ireland. Sean is the acting CEO of Tear Fund and joined the organisation. Has an annual budget of over 970,000 last year. Prior to joining, Sean was the sales and marketing manager in an SME manufacturing and construction company for 9 years. In addition to consulting with small businesses, he is also a spiritual mentor and is passionate about helping people becoming all that they were created to be. And finally, Mario Heinonen. I'm really battling with our Finnish pronunciations this morning. Abilis Foundation based in Finland. Mario is the executive director of Abilis since 2009. Before that, she worked in the development and disability sector since the late 1980s. She has many, many years of experience, having worked in Africa and Asia, in the least developed countries and in humanitarian crises. Abilis has an annual budget around 2.6 million euro, their main funder being the Ministry for Foreign Affairs of Finland. So I think that's probably good to hear. Thank you, Mario. David, if I can come to you with my first question, really a response to Miranda in terms of his engagement, but I suppose the key issue that we all want to hear in terms of leaders is how do we in our organization, some of us whom are not necessarily focused on disability, but we are in leadership, how do we make our organizations more inclusive for people with disabilities?
Great, thanks Shane for the question, and thank you Virendra for all that you shared regarding your work in Nepal and the important progress you are reaching around ensuring nothing about us without us. I think on this question of how to make our organizations more inclusive of persons with disabilities, as I've reflected on this, I'd suggest 5 key considerations that's been my learning in trying to pursue this within CBM Global. So the first is to ensure that this commitment toward inclusion is really championed and led by the leadership of the organization. I've seen in the past models where inclusion may be promoted by a specialist role, an individual or a unit that is then trying to influence the wider organization, and that has limited impacts. The key is that really this needs to sit with leadership and be championed by them as a priority for the organization. I think secondly, building on that, ensuring that the commitment toward inclusion is really grounded in the values, in the mission of the organization. It becomes part of the DNA, if you like, the very essence of what the organization is trying to achieve in its work. Because as long as it sits as some kind of tick box or compliance requirement, it will have very limited effectiveness. So really seeing it, I think we've recognized this in CBM Global, that if it's part of our values, understood as part of our mission, it becomes much more endorsed, embraced as central. I think number 3 is to have very clear policies on inclusion, diversity, on accessibility, so that the policy position is absolutely transparent, and then there are implementation plans to follow that. And point number 4 builds on that to say we ensure a progressive realization approach with real honesty as to how much we're progressing with our improvement plans, where we're still falling short, and we're very clear on that in CBM Global, where we know we have a lot of work still to do, and ensure we understand progressive realization, gradual incremental improvement. And accessibility is one such example at the moment, where we're trying to take an incremental approach to improve our accessibility commitments. And 5th and finally, it's really an overarching observation above all else, throughout all those steps, ensuring we ask people with disabilities, we ask organisations of persons with disabilities, we listen, we understand their perspectives, their priorities, to ensure that focus really drives everything we do around our commitment toward ensuring we are more inclusive. Thank you, Shane.
Wow, okay, that's great. I think we all go home now, David, after that. Very concise answer, 5 key points. Championing by leaders, so important, guided by our mission and values and our policies, and making sure that we have plans in place, and asking persons with disabilities themselves, so important. Can I come to you, Sean, and ask you your experience of this over the last year? Because you're not a disability organisation, so it'd be interesting to hear how you got on, similar to us.
Yeah, thanks, and yeah, very good points, David. Thank you. I think for us, what we had to realize, we had to start somewhere. And it would be very easy to get paralyzed by trying to overdefine the goal. I mean, I understand that when there's a change, you need to know where you're going, but we can't steer a boat unless it's in the water. So we have to start somewhere. We have to start taking some level of action. So for us, it was, trying to picture, what does disability inclusion look like for our organization? But don't wait until we have everything mapped out and get clarified. We had to start talking about it with staff, and we started to do an evaluation of some of the basics. But we had a learning session with other organizations, and this process has been really valuable and beneficial to us. And I'd say, in conjunction with our experience within the Vivid project, was last spring we undertook a culture assessment within the organization, and that showed us, or confirmed to us, that we are a learning organization, that we have strengths as a learning organization. So it helped us to begin really trying to integrate what we're learning through Vivid, and how we can bring that back into the organization. So it was about our mindset change, then creating awareness through the language that we use, and then that was leading to behavior change. So now our process now is to build systems to support those behaviors. I think that's where we are now. So we started very much at the basics, and we're learning now to see, well, how do we build those systems across the broader organization.
Okay, thanks, Sean. Yeah, you're quite similar to our engagement. I remember Colette giving me a questionnaire at the beginning of our process, and to be honest, I couldn't make head nor tail of it in terms of all of the it was about our understanding of how disability inclusive we were. So how far back were we? I really, it's quite interesting reflecting back 2 years ago. I'm not saying that we have made huge progress, but I remember getting frustrated with the questionnaire and giving that feedback to Katherine, I think it was, at EDF, because it was, we weren't there at all. We weren't in the picture at all in terms of our disability awareness. Not that we work with people with disability to our partners, but in terms of my own personal engagement, it was so removed. But let's pass on to Mario. And Mario, the same question to you around, or how do we make our organizations more inclusive, do you think, as leaders?
Thank you, Shane, and also thank you, colleagues. I think David and Jean already mentioned so many points from my list. I also had 5 main points that I wanted to highlight. And I don't want to repeat, but maybe to emphasize a couple of concrete points also to help you with practical steps. I like the idea of conducting a study or like a disability audit to get really concrete points to be addressed. be open and willing to change your own organization and really make this somehow relevant for your organization. It's also important to make a concrete implementation plan, and you can take steps gradually. So steps towards inclusion, and you should be somehow proactive or demonstrate somehow your way. And when you work with persons with disabilities and organizations of persons with disabilities, learn from them, share your experiences, ask questions, and start acting. I think that is very important. It's not just black and white. There are many ways to implement disability inclusion, depending on your organization and what you do and how you work. So somehow be active and be even proactive, and be ready to learn and exchange ideas with others. You can be also like a role model or a model to other NGOs, other organizations, how you implement disability inclusion in your work. It's really important to ensure that accessibility will be included. So reasonable accommodation was already mentioned, but accessibility should also be understood in a wide way. So there are different types of disabilities, different types of needs of persons with disabilities. So they can be really addressed and accommodated. So an organization as well as the employer can really make many adjustments and work together with persons with disabilities, and it can really work out well. Thanks.
Thank you, Mario. And I've just been getting text messages there, or chat box messages, to say that the others in the consortium had the same problem dealing with volunteering. So okay, I don't feel too bad. You mentioned some interesting points there, Mario. I'd like to ask you maybe a little bit off script, but I'm interested to know about reasonable accommodation, because we had a meeting in Finland about reasonable accommodation, and one of the scary thing around for funders, I think, is this big area of how to make our projects, you know, how to include disability in our projects, how to include people with disability in our projects. And reasonable accommodation, for me, was sort of highlighted at that meeting. You know, do you have anything to words of wisdom on that for me?
Thank you, Shane. There are many ways how to implement reasonable accommodation. I think one of my advice would be budget some money for reasonable accommodation, and also explain to the donor that there is a need to have some allocation that can be used, for example, for braille material or sign language interpretation, or any other assistance or special needs during the project. So depending on the case, depending on the disabilities involved, there are different types of needs, and then also exercises that we can make. So personal assistance could be one thing for physically disabled, but then also other means could be utilized.
Great. Yeah, I remember your chair of the board saying focus on the ability and not on the disability. You know, that the mindset is, when we come from a volunteering perspective, is to focus, oh gosh, will they be able to do this, or what, you know, what the whole mindset needs to change a little bit, I think, around this, you know, focusing on the ability of the person and not on the disability. I think is a good place to start as well. And I come back to you then, David, with the other question, which is really around how do we help to unlock the economic value of people with disabilities? Probably something similar to what we've covered a little bit there.
Yeah, thanks, Shane. I think my first observation would be around mindset, our attitude. And if I share a confession, I think back over my years working in the sector of humanitarian relief and development, and for many, many years, I was undertaking needs assessments in humanitarian settings or supporting projects that were built on community participation. But I'm well aware that a disability perspective was completely absent. So I wasn't even thinking, I wasn't aware of the importance of capturing the voice, the perspective of people with disabilities that would have been typically excluded within those projects that I was involved with. So I think it's important that as leaders, we recognize the importance of mindset, that this just needs to become part of the way we think. It's not enough that it's sort of in a procedural document or in our policies, but it has to just come from our mindset, our attitudes, our awareness. And we need some humility, I'll speak for myself, in recognizing we have improvement to make, we have work to do. I think then to recognize the importance of diversity, to unlock the social and economic value of people with disabilities in our organizations, we need to understand the barriers, the attitudinal barriers, the environmental barriers, the systemic exclusion that people with disabilities have faced, and that requires a conscious strategy from the organization to ensure those barriers are overcome. The example of reasonable accommodation that Mario just shared, and entry-level opportunities into staff positions. A number of our country offices provide internship schemes. I think there's a lot we want to build on and learn from those approaches. And I guess my final observation is that term intersectionality, but basically recognizing that in pursuing diversity, we need to recognize barriers in all their forms. So not just disability, but gender, for example. So women with disabilities may face particular challenges in having traditional barriers, attitudes that need to be overcome. So if we're serious about this unlocking of potential for people with disabilities, we need to take that comprehensive approach.
Great, thank you, David.
Just a reminder that 4 minutes left allocated for the interview there, thanks.
Thanks, Rachel. Sean, in terms of what do you think about unlocking the economic potential?
Yeah, I think I would, even if I may, just ask that question at a deeper level. Like, are we realizing the genuine value of a person rather than just the social and economic value? And if we can ask ourselves, are we recognizing just the value of the person, then that will feed into everything that we're doing and we're doing for them, which will feed into, you know, the wider economic value, social value. So I think it's really important just to see them as a person, and then, you know, if they happen to be a person with a disability, what is their value as just a human being? And I think one of the things that for us, we are working in a development and relief sector, we've realized that we have a dichotomy in that 2 of our programs, we incorporate how we work with people with disabilities, but yet as an organization, we hadn't been implementing and bringing all of those principles and learnings back into the wider organization. So this process with the Vivid partnership has enabled us to see that. It's, you know, we've seen, as David said, where the blanks were, where our biases are, or where our blind spots have been. So that's been a helpful process for us. Great,
thanks, Sean. And Mario, finally, I'm conscious of the time, sorry.
Yes, I would just like to add, look at the expertise, the talents, the skills, the qualification, not disability. I think that is the key point. So start recruiting experts with disabilities and accommodate and really arrange reasonable accommodation, meet the individual needs from your side, but ensure that the staff with disabilities enjoys equal treatment, equal possibilities and benefits. That's my advice. Thanks.
Thanks, Mario. I'm just going to bring back Brenda. Brenda, if you'd like to come back in there and give us what you feel about this so far. I don't know if you're on mute.
Well, okay. Yes, Shane. I hope you can hear me.
Sorry, I'm looking for Brenda. He's our guest speaker. Sorry, Brenda.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, the engagement of persons with disability is very much important for the different development initiatives, as well as it is important for the private sector engagement, as well as the job market. When the disability inclusive development, we talk about the disability inclusive development and the engagement of persons with disability in the productive way, how they can be the productive citizen in family and the community. So the private sector ownership should also take consideration of the capabilities of people with disability as they are engaged in the different business arena. Then the productivity has been seen very much high. We have one example in the hospitality business, as well as in the other entrepreneurship development. So the people with disability are not only the consumers, but they are the contributors for the society if the investment is given for their development and the capacity enhancement. So that is my reflection.
Thank you, Brenda. Guys, I need now just to get maybe, if you wouldn't mind, giving me one overriding outcome of the project. That what would it be? Maybe I'd like to maybe sort of turn this into some sort of commitment, perhaps, that we could work on together. Just maybe one or two lines on that, if you could, on the reflection of the project. David?
Yeah, thanks, Shane. Very briefly, I think our commitment is very much building on the wonderful and diverse relationships that have been established through the consortium, and to extend that commitment to working in partnership, including linking anyone interested into, for example, the Disability Reference Group that CBM Global is a co-chair of at the moment. So wanting to really build on the partnership relationships that we have and seek to go further. Thanks.
Thanks, David. And Sean?
Yeah, I would agree. I think this whole experience has helped us. We're seeing people who are a couple of steps ahead. We're seeing people who are, much further ahead, and we've been learning. And so for us, our commitment is to continue that learning and growth, and hopefully to continue it through the partnerships and relationships that we've been able to build.
And Mario, thanks, Sean.
I would emphasize the community of practice. So we have been sharing experiences, expertise, and that is really building capacity and strengthening cooperation, and actually leading to further partnerships and disability inclusive projects. That has been really wonderful. Thank you for that.
Thanks, Mario. Community of practice. Okay. Now, I'm not rushing us, but we have 10 minutes or so. I want to open it up to the audience, so it's not just us talking today. We have one or two people that I'd like to hear from. Teemu Soko. He's the he's the manager of Fair Trade Finland's Development Cooperation Program. And they've been involved in implementing some of these important measures in their organization. So maybe you'd like to give us a little bit of input on that, Teemu.
Hello, everybody. Yes, thanks for this really interesting seminar here. So my name is Teemu Sokka. I'm program manager of Fair Trade Finland. And so I run development cooperation program here. So most of you are aware of fair trade, and so our vision is a world which all producers can enjoy secure and sustainable livelihood. And fair trade standards are based on human rights and non-discrimination. But it's also about trade and business and private sector. So this is voluntary system that companies want to join a fair trade system, and consumers want to pay maybe a bit extra for those products they want to buy. So despite goodwill, not even the most ambitious sustainability standard like fair trade. So alone with standards or making those standards more strict, we cannot secure equal opportunities for all people, or sustainable livelihood. So alone, although we have that vision and goodwill, we cannot solve all those problems. So and we cannot force private companies to hire persons with disabilities or put a quota of 15%, for example. But we still have that vision of ours, and that is the reason why we also do development cooperation here, and funded by our foreign ministry, to really fulfill the vision and what we want to achieve. So with this development cooperation side, which I run, and partly in cooperation and help of Abilis Foundation, our partners and project personnel they've been trained on disability inclusion, especially in Africa, and it really has been eye-opener for many participants. And I've had pleasure to participate some of those sessions myself as well, and I've seen how it really has opened their eyes and changed the attitude. And never thought about it. So they have never thought about these disability issues or inclusion issues or barriers, etc. And some of them have been quite influenced by common beliefs and misunderstandings. So when we had that first study on accessibility and inclusion conducted by Abilis in Ethiopia, my expectations were not high, and of course not because of Abilis or naturally, but I assume that our partners would feel this inclusion being again something that our foreign ministry or fair trade or some people from North really push or force them to do, but it wasn't like that. The response was really positive. Something really changed there, and it really opened the ears and eyes there. And I have heard many times afterwards that hey, that we never thanks for this, and we never thought about that. And they are introducing like the new office that hey, look there, now we have this and this here, and that would have never happened. If this study or disability inclusion would not be part of our program. So and the next new process we started later. Our partners in Africa they had identified the local disability partner themselves. So it wasn't anymore pushed from here. So we managed to wake them up to start to think about these issues. So what we have done is like Mario, for example, said that we've been active and we've been role model actually in whole fair trade system.
Sorry, Timo, just less than a minute there, please.
Yep.
Thanks.
Yeah, a couple of words still. Nothing else. So focusing on really on ability and or barriers. Like we in Ethiopia we work with really big flower companies. They're hiring 20,000 people. So there are some jobs that these differently able people can do. So, but this recipe doesn't work for all. The precondition and base for success has been that there's goodwill of those private companies and fair trade standards of non-discrimination. So the private sector we work with, they have been open for this cooperation. They just needed a bit support to initiate it. So, and we lit that flame, and now it keeps on burning. So our current program is ending now, and I would say that this disability inclusion has been one of our success stories, and it went much better than I've ever dreamed of. So yeah, that's a bit from link it to private sector, but somewhere in between NGO private sector. Yeah, thanks.
Right. Thanks, Teemu. Yeah, very interesting. Very interesting how people are empowered or engaged. It reminds us very much of our own experience within VC. How I think we were literally asleep, and I think having that input, which wouldn't have come without this particular project, I suppose, it made me and the organization more aware of how much we need to do. So, thank you for that reflection. There is an interesting question, I think, in the checks. Perhaps we could hear from Father Pascal in Port Portal. Father, are you there? You have to unmute yourself. I can't see you.
Yes, I'm Shane.
Can you just tell us what your comment was? I'd be interested to hear from you.
Comment was to appreciate that inclusion of disabled and to unlock the economic contributions has existed among time immemorial. Each culture had its own of making these and contribute to the well-being of the community. So my question is, how we collect the decay or wiped out off the globe so that we can integrate our modern inclusion
Okay, I think you're dropping in, and Father Pascal is in Fort Portal, Uganda. So I'm hearing the question is that each community since time immemorial had at least one or two ways of unlocking the economic value of persons with disability, and how can these be collected and incorporated into our learning on a global level from different cultures? Would anybody like to take that one?
Well, David here, I can offer a response. I think I would have to challenge the notion that there is a kind of established commitment toward inclusion across the globe. That there can be, but I think of one example. I met an individual in Uganda many years ago. It was quite a formative experience in my own journey. A person who had polio as a child and described to me how exclusion was his whole life experience, and only through very significant personal journey he was able to become an established leader within his community, leading a community development process, but needing to overcome huge barriers. So I think my challenge would be, how do we ensure we gather learning on how to most effectively overcome barriers that exist, to overcome exclusion that exists in all of our societies, in my society, in the UK, and around the world, because we see many examples where inclusion is being achieved. So let's celebrate those situations, but let's draw our learning from what makes for most effective ways to overcome that kind of systemic discrimination that people with disabilities tell us is their lived reality.
Thanks, David. Does anybody, Mario or Sean, want to comment on that?
Yes, I could just add a couple of more points. I would like to emphasize that there is very often lack of understanding what is disability all about. So raising awareness on disability makes usually a big difference. And as Teemu explained, it can be very eye-opening to understand the disability a bit better. And as also mentioned here earlier, there are misbeliefs, there are traditional taboos, and also very strong stigma on persons with disabilities. And so basically making efforts on raising awareness. And then also, whenever now persons with disabilities can really participate and show the talents and also demonstrate that we are human beings and we are also citizens and we can contribute to family lives, community, society, and so forth. So gradually also attitudes and behavior can be changed. And nowadays, disability inclusion is very well recognized by donor agencies, international organizations, and so forth. So that's why also my message to Uganda is that just raise it up, discuss as much as possible, and really encourage people with disabilities to raise these issues up.
Great, thanks,
gradually
Mario.
we can change the world.
one day at a time. Right, I'm conscious of time. Maybe there's one. Marco, I wonder, is Marco there from ASPEM? I'm just conscious that Marco might be in the audience. He might like to make a quick comment. Marco is part of ASPEM, which is one of our consortium partners.
Yes, thank you, Shane. And I want only to share our experience as ASPEM, because for us, the perspective that we introduced in our organization with this project, it's very important, and it's a new point of view. We are very engaged in sending volunteers, so including in this area the inclusion perspective. It's very important, and we engage all the level of our organization, from the board to the staff, because we are sure that to implement a new perspective and a new way to implement the sending of volunteers is very important to involve all of the organization level. And also it's important the next step of the project, that it's the reviewing of all our policies in the managing of volunteers, so from the selection to the security and communication and so on. So I want to share our thanks to all partners for these results.
Thanks, Marco, very much. Guys, I'm conscious of the time is now almost up, but I do need to hear from Sarah O'Toole. She is the CEO of Cbn Ireland, and Cbn Ireland are the lead partner in the Vivid project. So I've asked Sarah to join us to give us maybe a quick run through of the key action points that maybe we as leaders and leaders present here in the audience today. Sorry, we couldn't get everybody in. I think the experience might be that we need to lengthen these type meetings a little bit in order to get more engagement from the participants. So Sarah, can I pass it over to you if you're there?
Yes, thanks, Shane. And just first of all to say thanks to VC for organising today's event. I was at the earlier session, really insightful stuff coming through, and as you say, we could spend all day, many days, talking around the experiences we've had, particularly with this Vivid Tea project. It's been a great experience for Cbn Ireland to work with all our partners on this. And I was writing furiously there as the panel were speaking about their experiences and commitments, etc. But what really stood out for me was this sense of a community of practice, of a commitment to continue this road of learning and sharing our experiences. A couple of key points. One thing I did this morning was actually I Googled the theme of this Friday's International Day of Persons with Disabilities. And interestingly, it's around leadership and participation of persons with disability towards an inclusive, accessible and sustainable post-COVID world. And I think we've all learned a lot in the last 2 years. But what we take from this learning, I think, is really what's going to help us, as Mario said, change the world one step at a time. And key points, and David had mentioned about influencing leaders to drive inclusion is really when you see real change happening, making sure it's part of the culture of the organization, part of its DNA. Also, what's really valuable is speaking frankly about our own experiences. Cbn Ireland, we are a disability organisation focused on inclusion, but we've learned a huge amount ourselves around what we do internally as an organisation. And we're open and sharing about that too. Funders, which is always a challenge. I think we need to try and speak more to be more robust with funders about the importance of inclusion in everything that we do and that they do. And for us, it's only the beginning. We've also seen there's a huge amount of resources have been developed throughout the lifetime of this project. And it's important for us to widen the net and share those with the sector, share them with our own different fora that we're involved in. And really just to say to people, be part of this movement and, you know, play your part. Even for those attending today haven't been part of Vivid, to take one key thing you've learned today and bring that back to your organization and just start to take action now. Thank you, Shane.
Great. Thanks, Sarah. And thank you all for, you know, the guest speakers today, particularly Barendra, for sharing and the wisdom that's all in that, the wisdom in the leaders. I hope it's been of some use to you. It has been an amazing journey for us. And I'm not just saying that because it's EU sponsored or EU supported. The organization has now incorporated it into its strategic plan. Disability was not on our radar, wasn't on my radar before joining this program, but 15% of the world's population has a disability, either acquired or from birth. That's a huge, huge number, and we cannot just you know, fail to ignore that. So I thank you all for listening, and I hope you'll join us later for the next session. We will be sharing resources, and we will be hearing more about the core humanitarian standards and our journey into that area as well. So thank you.
Okay, thanks everybody. We're breaking now for lunch, so it's a little bit of a longer break, and we'll be back here at 1 o'clock GMT. So thanks everyone.